looking at the self is that what's behind it, that those are symptomatic, that there's really a causal thing. And it's the ego, for me.
From the Big Island of Hawaii, welcome to Aloha Speaks, home of Malama Aloha Pono by Alexander Noman, offering relief for all relationships with a focus on anger assessment and resolve.
Aloha. Alex here with Aloha Speaks. And today we're going to talk about the why in the road between what looks like the two selves. And I looked in what the dictionary I have, which is actually the Oxford Pocket Dictionary and Thesaurus I've had for many years, what the definition of self is in that regard. And what it says is, and it says right after it, the plural is selves. So maybe it's talking about there could be more than one self in the room, more than one person. But what I'm talking about here is there's something I'm looking at in myself of a possibility of two selves in me. And I admit that I totally admit that I'm definitely more than likely sicker than maybe a lot of people. I'm hoping or giving the possibility that that could put me in a position of helping someone who could possibly relate to challenges that I face having these conditions. So when it looks like, there's temptations of addictive temptations, it looks like those things are the problem. And what I've come to find through reflective, the word that's going to be used here is introspective, what Malama Aloha Pono process uses the word assessments, personal assessments, whatever it is, looking at the self, is that what's behind it, that those are symptomatic, that there's really a causal thing. And it's the ego, for me. It's crystal clear in the assessment of the situation, in the introspection, in the reflection, which takes effort, that there is an inflated ego behind it that helps incredibly to deflate the ego. Okay, so that takes something. That takes something. So let's just not get ahead here and stick with this definition. Here's because it just always wants to be cerebral, which is an antithesis of the heart. And I want to be in touch with my heart. But it can be a benefit to use the tool So here's this number one. There's three definitions. Number one, individuality, semicolon, essence, semicolon, personality. That's number one. Now I look at that for myself and I go, okay, individuality, that's it. Then I look at essence. To me, whoa, essence is deep. I don't want to get into that, but then right after that it says personality. To me, those are opposing, they're conflicting. They're essence, personality. Those are two different things there to me, because I've done a lot of reflection. I'm going, wait a second here. So I'm going to put that on the table there and go, that's a little confusing there, that number one. So I go to number two. This is self. And I go, okay, number two, person or thing as the object of introspection or reflexive action. Person or thing, that's me, as the object of introspection or reflexive action. I go, wait a second. Those are two different things. They're conflicting. Introspection, looking at myself. Reflexive action, that's reacting. That's the opposite. That's like I'm being controlled. That's me being a victim. To me, that's how I look at it. For me, I'm just going, wait a second. This does not have a lot of clarity to defining self here. It's starting to look like what I suspected, which I already have my own experience. There's two selves here. There's the one that wants me to believe it's me between the ears. That is not very good. Now let's get to... Now, by the way, right after that, there's a parentheses. This is even more confusing. The consciousness of self. This is still number two. The consciousness of self. Now, to me, that's crystal clear. The consciousness of self. Now we're talking heart. To me, that's heart. No between the ears stuff there. That's like consciousness of self. That's what we're talking. But that stuff before was object of introspection or reflexive action. Reflexive. That's up here. 3. There's two parts to 3. A, one's own interests or pleasure. The desire, that stuff that kicks in like, yeah, I want pleasure, I want immediate gratification. B, concentration on these, own interests and pleasure. Parentheses, self is a bad guide to happiness. Completely opposing to the consciousness of self, which is pure happiness. No help there. It's the same thing I'm left with, which is behind all my suffering, behind all of the stuff that brings me pain in the emotional and even physical suffering. So then I go to the Google. I go to Google and I put in self. And the very first thing that pops up happens to be exactly what number 2 says. The first thing that pops up. Person or thing as the object of introspection or reflexive action. That's what it pops up, the most simple thing. Opposing introspection or reflexive action. With everything I've done, the work that I've done, all these years, it wasn't just for the last 12 years since I've been clean and sober. I started in my 20s, in the 80s. In fact, I had 10 years of sobriety. I went into AA in 1984. And I was clean and sober till 1994. So I had all of that time doing the 12 steps, but also I studied, I went head over heels into the Byron Katie teachings. I've done head over heels into the 4 agreements. I have studied relentlessly Dr. Young's teaching, so complicated, talk about cerebral, and yet powerful, so valuable. What Dr. Young, his contribution, and many more that I won't even get into. But with the Malama Aloha Pono, and also the contribution of ever since I've been in 32 years on the Big Island, and the contribution of the Hawaiian Islands, what have brought to my well-being and my growth. But there's even more than that. That it's been simplified to the only thing that benefits me is simplicity. It's not the cerebral. Because that's the self between the ears. That is the false self. It's the one that presents itself to me as who I am. That is not who I am. That gets me in trouble. That takes me not only out of where I want and need to be, it causes problems. It causes problems. Not only for me, for other people around me. And then offers in the denial of that. Like, it's not me. It's them. They're the cause of the problem. So what's going on is I buy into a lie from the beginning and throughout. And the only way I can have peace with and it not be at the expense of others is to be crystal clear on the truth. That's what Malama Aloha Pono is. It has evolved from and to, is to offer that simplicity, and yet requires consciousness and effort in that direction of introspection, of assessment on a constant and consistent basis for myself. Also for anyone else who might be interested, but I have no dog in the hunt for anyone else. I definitely have a dog in the hunt for me. zero dog in the hunt. It's none of my business, and that's part of the whole thing. Mind my own business. So difficult. So difficult. Because of the buying into the lie. Has such ripple effects. So it's a slow unveiling. It's a slow and steady unveiling. Until next time, aloha. And to close, clicking on the thumbs up icon supports Aloha Speaks, as well as clicking on the free subscribe tab. Mahalo.